Deakin has graduated its first class from its Gift City campus, which is fantastic. Gift City, obviously, just outside of Ahmedabad in the state of Gujarat in India. They were the first Australian university to set up operations in India post the passing of the Act to allow institutions to come in. Mate, it's just great to see.
So again, and they are skipping meals. We're also seeing this, and we partnered with Food Bank and the Food Bank social impact report that they produce every year. Not only is it the students are skipping meals, we're seeing domestic, everyday Australians skipping meals as well, or cutting back because of the cost of living. So it is a real pressure in Australia. And I guess from a responsibility across the sector, as an insurer, we're trying to help in those moments that matter through Food Bank.
G'day and welcome to Global Horizons. I'm your host, Rob Malicki, coming to you today from Garigal Land in Sydney.
And I'm Dirk Mulder, CEO and founder of the Koala News. I'm coming to you from the west of Sydney on Durrag country.
And Dirk, maybe just to sort of put a timestamp on what week we're in, a few things going on in the world at the moment. Possibly the most obvious one for listeners is the cost of petrol, which is the best timestamp ever. Currently sitting around about $2.50 for a litre of unleaded and $3.30 for diesel in the major capitals. God knows what it is in kind of regional and remote Australia. We're into the fifth week of the war between the US and Iran. And maybe the other thing, Dirk, before we start talking news, is maybe the other really big thing on the domestic front is One Nation clocking something like 24% in the South Australian state election recently. We might talk about some of that stuff, but we're actually here to talk about international ed, aren't we?
We sure are, Rob. We sure are.
What do you reckon we're going to go through? I mean, you've been working hard behind the scenes, keeping us up to date with all the stories. What do you reckon are the top things we need to chat about this week?
Mate, look, this week, the last 2 weeks probably has been busier than ever. I keep saying that probably every podcast we do, but it just keeps crescendoing. Yeah. Mate, the topics, the hot topics, I guess, this week are evidence levels were released last Friday. We'll probably have a little bit of a deep dive into some data. Tracy Harris writes a great story on that during the week. A big one where I think the housing industry is actually now at the crosshairs of government policy, and we'll talk a little bit about how local government and federal government policies might be at loggerheads. And Deakin graduates its first class from Gift City in India. We've spoken about that previously on the podcast, but it's great to see them graduate. And our guest later on will be Sam Eade, who's the Head of Product Management and Innovation at Allianz Partners. She'll be talking us through the recent released 2025 State of Student Healthcare Report, which is a fantastic report. So looking forward to having her on.
Yeah, I just read that in prep for this conversation. I'm really looking forward to having Sam on because far out, that's a great report. I'm going to call her out once we're on. I'm sure I'll be like, Sam, this is a freaking good report. Everyone needs to read it. So I'm looking forward to that. But how about we just jump back up to the top? You've been doing quite a bit of reporting around the evidence levels. For those people who are new to the podcast and unfamiliar with that language, maybe they're working in a different part of international ed that doesn't stray across that line. Do you want to first just tell us what the evidence levels are and then break down what's going on, because this is kind of nonsensical out there right now?
Yeah, sure. So, as you say, for those that may not know, institutions participate in a system called the Streamlined Student Visa Program, which essentially means that every student who applies for a visa gets graded, and they get graded based on what we call evidence levels or assessment levels. And there's two types. One is depending on which country you come from, so you're assessed by that country, and the other is what institution you're going to. So it depends on the assessment level of that. Now, all of that is based on risk, and there's a whole lot of metrics that sit behind it. But the one for this conversation that we really want to talk about is about visa rejections. So if you have essentially a buttload of visa rejections, you're deemed by the Australian government to be a higher risk institution, and that pushes you down in levels. Now, what do those levels mean? Well, if your level, there's 3 levels in the system. Level 1 essentially means lower risk. It means that, you've got a really good grant rate, your students are sticking with you, you're doing all the right things, and essentially there's low fraud, there's, you're well trusted. What that means at the front means is that the students need to probably present fewer extra requirements, such as proof of English or detailed financial documentation. If you're, a moderate risk or level 2, it means you might need more documentation. It might be required depending on, again, the country and the provider combo. And if you're level 3, which is really where no institution wants to live, you're high risk, and it means that you're going to have stricter evidence requirements and more scrutiny, and likelihood a much longer visa pathway. So from application to receipt, maybe weeks or even months, depending, as opposed to a level 1, which generally gets through in a few weeks.
You know what I like, Dirk, is that this is just sounds like such a predictable, almost algorithmic system that is transparent and easy to understand and apply, and then advise against. Right, that's exactly what we. I feel like
you're setting me up here, Rob. You're setting me up. That's the way it should work. Absolutely. So, mate, the story is that the government dropped these levels, reassessment of levels on Friday of last week. And, what's it like, a government dropping stuff on Fridays? It's becoming pretty consistent. I know, shock horror. But what the results have shown, and what I should say as an underscore, is that these lists aren't published publicly. So it's not like you can go to a website and be like, the University of X is level 2 and the University of Y is level 3 and the University of, B is this. They're not published. So you don't know what they are. Obviously, institutions are written to by the Department of Home Affairs to say this is what your level will be, but there is a workaround. Those crafty people out there can go through the document checklist and essentially work out between country and institution what levels each are, and which then allows people like me to be able to pick up on that in a very informal way and be able to say, well, what's actually happened? So in the last set of results, there were 2 institutions that moved. One went up and one went down. No one's at level 3, but one went up to a level 1 and one came down to a level 2. I won't mention the institutions, but what I would say is, talking to a significant number of readers around the country and people who are in, senior roles at institutions, they've been watching this space. I was taken back by only 2 movements, and particularly only one going down. So only one institution going in the downward way. And the reason for that is that for the last 6 months, people have been screaming out about visa rejections, inconsistent visa assessments. One would imagine that there would have been a lot more coming down based upon that fact. Yeah. So if you look at the grant rates over time, if grant rates come down, well, that means the institutions are getting less visas, and it means their own grant rates are going down. So for this to occur, it kind of scratches your head. And the way that I wrote the story was essentially that could be interpreted in a couple of different ways, right? So first is that, if the system is designed relying on longer-term trends rather than reacting to short-term fluctuations, maybe it's working as it should be. However, it probably doesn't then reflect what's actually happening in the lived experience right now. The second is that there is a lag in this. So, maybe this is something that's going to be brought out in the next lot of data, which I think cuts off 30 June, released September-ish, September, October, November time. And we might see that. Now, there's been a number of comments online around this, and I think if I'm being honest, I probably wrote this story with 2 kind of thoughts in mind. One is, look what's happening now, but also then to plant the seed for people to start thinking about, well, what's going to happen in June? And I don't mind saying, if we don't see much movement in June, then something awry is happening. The data and the system that's been created is obviously not working as intended, and there is manipulation or coercion or something going on in the background to maintain institutions at a certain level. Because some of the February visa data just came out, and we've seen, I think, from memory, it's India that's gone down to like a 6. Don't anyone yell at me for this. From memory, it's gone from like 80% to 60% in February. So when you see that sort of decline, and the numbers that are involved, you've got to think that's got to impact institutions and their ability to maintain their level in a system which is designed to reward performance in certain spaces.
Of course, we had the ministerial visits that went to sort of Southeast Asia and India as well, from memory. That was, I want to say January, or was that December? And basically,
I want to say December.
Yeah, I want to say December, and and basically there are a whole bunch of changes that came off the back of that.
As in
overnight,
all South Asia based. Yeah,
all overnight,
all downwards, all South Asia based. And I think what we're probably seeing from that is that February data picking up on that. So probably not surprising, but again, when you think about the system and the work, working through that system, the next logical, outcome of that is that we should have a significant amount of universities drop down in assessment level rankings.
Level 2, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for people who aren't aware of it, how this sort of stuff works in the real world, when a minister goes off and does one of these sort of trips, a lot of stuff's sort of planned in advance. You've got bureaucrats from both countries who work together and decide where the minister's going to go and basically what they're going to do. And a lot of what's actually going to get discussed and agreed on is all pre-planned and agreed on in advance. But sometimes that doesn't always go to plan, and ministers can make any sorts of decisions when they're on the road and literally come back and say to their departments, right, I've made a decision, or, the government has made a decision, you are now going to do A, B, C. And government departments, public servants have to respond to that. And there's quite a lot of pressure to sort of get that sort of stuff done fast. So you never quite know where these things have come from and what's happening behind the scenes, what's going on under the hood. But, it can actually add a lot of pressure to the people who have to implement this at a departmental level.
Look, absolutely, mate.
And that's why that's why when this stuff comes out, you're reporting, I'm reading this, I'm just like, oh, if there is something going on behind the scenes, you kind of, my heart actually goes out to the bureaucrats who essentially have to implement this stuff, because it's not necessarily their doing, if it makes sense.
No, mate, absolutely. But I mean, look, like I said, if you talk to people who are in institutions at the moment, I mean, their backs against the wall. Even in universities now, we're looking at significant upheaval, significant questions being asked within institutions, and it was the whole point around that whole the indiscriminate nature of visa assessments. How do you, as an institution, predictably put an application to government when you're getting assessments that are coming back which are just non-congruent? So we're in a really weird kind of space at the moment, and I think it's at this point in time, if you're a vice chancellor and you're asking what's going on, there's probably still a lot of unanswered questions out there, and it must be a difficult space to navigate.
Yeah, really hard, and those people who are getting asked by their vice chancellors what's going on, and you can't give a straight answer, of course, because nobody really knows. It's a little bit
and again, it goes back to what we've spoken about so many times about objectivity and having knowing that applications should be moving through the system as they were 6 months ago, and they're not now. And there's no rhyme nor reason for it. And when you see evidence of some of those rejection letters, they seem to be cut and paste. They seem to be consistent. And Ian Pratt was really good 2 weeks ago when he came on and spoke us through that. So if anyone's listening and have not listened to the Ian Pratt conversation, do yourself a favour and do that, because it's a really good one to get some insight into those areas.
Yeah, awesome. So Tracy Harris has been digging deeper on some of the 2025 data. This is some really interesting stuff too. Yeah,
absolutely. So look, I don't want to take the limelight away from Tracy. She's done an absolute great job. I wrote a story when the numbers came out, and obviously it's really hard to write a story that is fully comprehensive. It would probably be thousands and thousands of words with lots and lots of tables. But Tracy's kind of taken an angle and I guess moved on the work that was previously done and had a bit more of a deeper dive. And what she's really looked at is the new to Australia commencements. So there's a few points. If you look at the headline, it's, higher ed basically grew by 2%, private higher ed declined by 4%. And while enrolments for private higher education were up 17% to 7% in the public sector, it's historically strong growth in early years and recent movements in commencement yet to fully impact those enrolments. So when we see those commencements going down significantly and the enrolments holding, we know that those commencements are going to affect the enrolment patterns in time as they move through the system. What's the really interesting one is the government, I want to say about 12 months ago, created a new tag, which is new to Australia. Overall, while total commencements were down 14% year on year, new to Australia commencements were down 18%. So that means we're actually seeing a bit of recycling going on. And the vet sector was down 49% on new to Australian commencements. Yep. And 50% down for private education providers. So that gives you a sense in terms of what's actually coming into the system from offshore, which then should marry up with grant rate data and visa success data, but then what's actually happening within the country and the recycling. So when you move those together, then you get the top line data. Seeing those new to Australia commencements are significantly more revealing than what the total headline suggests.
Mate, you've done a great job designing this run sheet today. Can I just say that? This is a great run sheet that you put together, because that literally flows perfectly. This is the newsman in you. Flows perfectly through to this next topic. And we're going to talk about accommodation, because, of course, like all of this has sort of been borne out because of this is going back a couple of years now, but we started to have this rhetoric around too many international students and stealing our houses instead of really focusing on the supply issue of housing in Australia. And this decision that's come out this week, I just can't understand this. This is absolutely nonsensical.
Yeah, absolutely. So Randwick Council, which is an inner city council of Sydney, where the University of New South Wales resides or is hosted, has put a moratorium on new student housing builds. It blows my mind. I mean, the immediate thing that I thought was it just doesn't make sense. If you've got I think UNSW is up around the 70,000 mark now. It's massive.
Massive.
So if you're not building purpose student housing, where are those students going to go? They're going to compete for residential housing, aren't they? And surely having investment and having those students, located closer to the university makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You take them out of competition for residential buildings, but then you're also creating an ecosystem which is close to the university. So you could argue sustainability, close to amenities. So you're building, a stronger cohort and lively pockets within your council area. Oh, mate, and it's not just international students. The ABC ran a story and they actually promoted, I think, a kid from Orange who was going to study at UNSW and in that exact predicament. Like, what do? Do you go into student housing? Obviously, UNSW has, some colleges. You've got Baxter and Barker, I think, from memory off the top of my head, but clearly not enough to do that. So when you've got the federal government that's talking about, well, we need, housing to be put alongside institutions, and institutions have a responsibility now for housing and being able to accommodate these students, and then you've got local councils going, yeah, not in my backyard, thanks very much. You're at a real policy crosshairs. And Adele Berg from the Student Accommodation Council, which is she's the executive director there, which obviously rolls up into the Property Council. I reached out to her, and I think Adele and I saw it pretty much the same way. So she said, councils can't say they support housing supply while declaring moratoriums on new housing. You don't solve a shortage by banning homes, which makes complete sense to me. So, mate, it's
nuts. And the thing is, the thing that's really problematic in this. Businesses need certainty in order to commit to investments. And you hear this all across the economy. This is not exclusive to construction, but businesses will invest when the policy environment is stable. And we saw that for a decade when there was no certainty around renewable energy, for example. Current government was elected 5 odd years ago, provided certainty, and now the investment is absolutely flooding into the renewable energy sector in Australia.
Yep.
Accommodation is no different. Housing is no different. If businesses don't have certainty that the policy is going to allow for that investment to be made, for that housing to be created, they simply won't invest. And so this whole thing we've been hearing...
Shock horror, Rob. Shock horror.
The whole thing we've been hearing is like, and this isn't just about student housing, it's about housing in general. But the moment a level of government, pick your level of government, says, not going to have that, then we're in a real sticky situation, because businesses straight away are going to say, well, hang on a second, I thought this was a national emergency. Don't look much like a national emergency to me if local government is putting a moratorium. And for those people who don't know what moratorium means, it means basically a temporary ban, a moratorium on student housing. To me, I don't know, if I was the state government or I was the feds, I'd be straight down there to Randwick, knocking on the door saying, sorry folks, but what the are you doing?
You're right. I got no other thing to say, but you're right. Yeah, the end. I mean, it's absolutely bonkers.
Can I go down off my soapbox now, Dirk?
Yeah, mate, you're doing great. You're doing great. Stay on there as far as I'm concerned. I think the issue deserves it and deserves the attention.
Let's talk about something cheery and happy to finish, rather than something that's going to get my my nerves up for the rest of the day.
Let's. Yeah, look, as I mentioned in the opening remarks, Deakin has graduated its first class from its Gift City campus, which is fantastic. Gift City, obviously, just outside of Ahmedabad in the state of Gujarat in India. They were the first Australian university to set up operations in India post the passing of the Act to allow institutions to come in. Mate, it's just great to see. I mean, it's beyond... I mean, we could go into the detail. Why is it good? It's great that Australians flying the flag in India. It's great that Deakin, who has had a presence in India for such a long time, has consolidated that into a campus. It's great that students who may not be able to afford to come to Australia have the opportunity to study an Australian degree in India. It's great they're going to come out with graduate qualifications from an Australian institution, which hopefully will place them well in their local marketplaces or on the global stage. It just seems like a bit of a win-win. This inaugural cohort, the qualification came from the master's degrees degrees in business analytics and cybersecurity, and that's in brackets professional, with many already apparently, as Deacon says, securing roles in finance and technology sectors in India and internationally. So it's wonderful to see. It's great to see Australian transnational education doing well, particularly in India, and look forward to following the journey. What I would say as a quick left turn, I don't know whether you saw the ABC story last night on university governance, but there was this kind of view that Australian universities need to be more transparent around how they utilise their money. George Williams made a really good point where he was saying 10 years ago, Australian universities were funded 80% by the government. That's now down to 40%. But there still seems to be this view that, last night they brought in a view around consulting. And, I think there was an accounting professor from Wollongong who mentioned that across the sector in universities, they spend $1.8 billion in consulting. I want to say that's per annum, but I might be wrong with that, which, is like shock and awe. And, the minister then comes on and says, well, it's not just that they spend the money, but who are they spending it with? And that needs to be more transparent and all the rest. The point that I'm getting to is we've spoken about this a lot. And I personally think it's great that we are doing T&E. It's fantastic. And I think T&E done well, it's a difficult thing to do. If you do it well, it's a great thing. How do you say to the Australian public, if universities are losing their social licence in Australia because they're bringing in international students, or they're trying to seek additional funding through other mechanisms because the government's not funding them properly, how do you turn around and say, well, hang on, you're using public funds to pay for consultants, but then how do you really sell T&E? And I'm not trying to be a negative Nelly on this because, again, I support the T&E notion. How do you, in that context, then say a university uses then public money? Because if they're using public money to spend on consultants, it's coming out of the pool of income. How do you then say they're using Australian taxpayer money to go and set up an enterprise abroad which doesn't teach Australian university students? It teaches an offshore cohort. I find that really hard to be able to justify, but yet, again, the government seems gung-ho on saying, yep, let's go offshore. You can go offshore. We encourage it. This is good for Australian education. I don't think you can have it one way without having it the other way. And I think there's something in me that says it's only a matter of time, whether it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, that we're going to be having the same discussion about social licence, but it's going to be about all these mega campuses that universities now have offshore, and how does that relate back to the acts that sit within Parliament for each of these institutions? That I don't know. Let's just say the university. I don't know. I don't want. I'm just picking one. Let's just say the University of South Central Australia, which is a figment of my imagination, is set up and it's got an act in Parliament that says its purpose is to serve the students of South Central Australia. And then suddenly there's 3 mega campuses that they've got offshore. Mate, I just call me Nostradamus, but I think we're going to have the same conversation about how did we get there. Why is an Australian university teaching more students in Vietnam or Malaysia or Singapore than what they do here in Australia? And it's the same conversation that we've had about CQU or others who are based in Rockhampton. They're meant to be doing that, but they have campuses in Sydney and Melbourne. And to me, there's no. If anything, it's worse going offshore because there's no dividend back to the Australian taxpayer. There's no access for Australian domestic students necessarily. I really worry that we're creating a situation that we are not going to be able to explain in a reasonable fashion in the future because other funding mechanisms have all been shut down and the government's gone, yep, this is a good one for you, go do that.
Cash register. Mm-hmm. Which, ironically, exactly. Dirk, is the one thing that, we've sort of tried to avoid in the industry is that talk about international students just being the cash cow. International educators don't talk like that for the most part. No. You do find them, but we don't talk like that. We try and look at things holistically.
That's the role of the CFO, mate.
Yeah, and look, CFOs do their job. But the irony being that they're now being pushed into a position where that's kind of what's happening. That strikes me as one might call ironic.
Didn't Alanis Morissette write a song on that a long time ago?
Yeah, I think
there you go.
So.
Gen X's stand up.
Yeah, awesome. Look, I'm just going to, before we move on to our guest, Sam Eade from Allianz, I just want to call out Deakin Uni. Deakin, they're a great uni, and it's an institution that they just quietly are out there getting shit done. Like kicking butt, kicking goals, serving their communities, getting wins. Like John Maloney, I worked for John Maloney many, many years ago. awesome operator. He's just, he's not out there doing like heaps of media and stuff. He's just out there with his team getting shit done. Like, respect to Deakin, because they're a great institution kicking goals. So wrapping that section, like, just respects them for getting those runs on the board up there in Gift City. And maybe with that, Dirk, probably seems like a good time for us to bring in our guest. What do you reckon?
Sure does, Rob. Listeners, it's great to have Sam Eade. Sam is from Allianz. She's the head of product management and innovation. And Allianz have just released their 2025 State of Student Healthcare report. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself and the role of Allianz.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for introducing my title as well. And just to mention, I've been working for this line of business for 3.5 years now. So again, I was quite new to international health. So this is the first time I've ever worked in international health.
Oh.
And for someone like me that's joined the business, I spend a lot of time focusing on international students, their experience, working with them, our B partners, our education partners, our agents, and our internal teams, because the team that I work in and I lead is focused around, I guess, the strategy, the product, what the market tells us, and also some of our marketing sits in my team as well. So we're that service that supports not only our external partners, but our internal stakeholders too. But my goal's quite simple for when I wake up every day and I sit at the desk here. It's to make things simple for students, to make health cover easier for them to understand, easy to use, and generally support them while they're living in Australia, because they're home away from home now. So that's what we do every day, and that's what we get up, and that's what we strive we call our team the PM&I health team. That's what we do every day.
I can absolutely second that. I probably actually put in a little disclosure here. I actually worked for Allianz back in the day. So I know all too well, I guess, that daily kind of focus on the student, making the students' lives better, making their experience better, looking obviously at OSHC and how you can support students in that way. So it's really good to hear that Allianz is still doing a great job in that space.
Absolutely. And we continue to improve what we do all the time. So we're just leveling up every year as a team as well. But SOSH is just to demonstrate where we're starting to understand the market even more and improving the dialogue in the community, in the market as well.
Yeah, it's really important, isn't it? So Allianz partners, and Allianz has gone through a few iterations over the years. So for back in the day, people would have probably known that as OSHC WorldCare, and then moved into Allianz, and now it's Allianz Partners. You've just released, I think it's your third iteration of the State of Student Healthcare report. Really interesting read and a really thorough document, so congratulations on that. One of the points that really stood out, I think, to me was just, I guess, the highlights of cost of living as a major pressure point. Can you maybe just give us a little bit of background to that? And were you surprised by, I guess, just how much that stood out? Yeah,
so I'll start from the top, why we started to write SOSH and put it out there in the market. So like I mentioned previously, I was quite new to the business. And I came out of a place called personal injury and private health insurance, where there are market reports on insights, trends, and people get injured. And I thought, there should be one on students. I'm going to learn about them. I want to know what's happening to them from a healthcare perspective. What are their blockers in their pathway while they're living here? And I realized there was nothing in the industry. There was probably one paper around mental health out there. And I was like, well, this is an opportunity for us to talk about it. And our teams, our internal teams, our key account managers, our sales team, our PM&I team, we know what the experience was, but I thought it's an opportunity to talk about the experience through an evidence-based way. And here we are, 3 years in, we've surveyed over 5,000 students in the market, and every year we'll continue to grow that sample size and the team's efforts, and also we've partnered with QS efforts together to increase that sample size is there. But what we're starting to see is the cost of living crisis is real. And I'm going to give you a common misconception, and that was actually mine, and I'm putting my hand up saying that I thought the same thing, because I went to Macquarie University and I saw an international student driving a Lamborghini. So I thought everybody was cashed up. This was 19-year-old me, right? So that was my assumption. They all had money. They didn't have to go to work. But in fact,
really, Sam, they were just the ones that invested in crypto, 10 years ago, and they put $10 into Bitcoin, and now they've got a Lambo.
Yes. Who knows? But again, that was my misconception as somebody that didn't work in this line of business. But in fact, the more and more I sat down and the more and more I started to investigate what was happening, it actually takes a village to get them out here to Australia. Yeah, there are some, students that can afford it and affluent and their parents can back them while they're here. But there is a lot of students that come out here, their families depending on everything, and then to get educated.
Yep.
So yes, 85% of them did report that higher than expected cost associated with living here, which represents a gap. But not only our students are facing this, it's a domestic issue as well. Like, look at the cost of petrol. I saw diesel was at $3 the other day.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's $3.30. That's crazy. That may prevent an international student from driving their car, for example, or, resorting into public transport or not going to university because it is expensive. But again, it's becoming a Australia-wide issue. It's more pronounced. It's going up year on year. But from a surprise perspective, we're just seeing it from a local economy as well. But students continue to come to Australia. It is a great place to learn. We have best-in-class institutions and universities to support them as well. But yes, not completely surprising, but definitely cost of living is becoming a big pressure for everybody, not including students as well.
Can I just say, this was my first time reading this report. This is a fantastic report. Like, I honestly think that people working in international ed need to pick this up and at least scan through some of the headline statistics, because it tells quite a vast story. Some stuff people might intuitively say, oh yeah, I would have expected that to be true, but it really puts meat on the bones around some of these things that people might instinctively feel is true. One of the stats that jumped out to me was around the fact that 17% of students said that, only 17% said that they really understand the healthcare system, which is a little bit frightening. What do you think's driving that gap in knowledge?
Can I ask you guys a question? How easy is it for you to navigate the healthcare system as an Australian?
Mate, I'll give you an example literally as of yesterday. So I'm looking after my mum at the moment. She's 83. She just got her quarterly bill for a private health insurer, which it may or may not be one of your competitors in the student space. And it's gone up to $626 and something cents. And mum,
quarter,
mum, that's a quarter, yeah. So, mum's 83, obviously gets the pension. She's lucky she owns her own home. I won't go into too much detail. But, yeah, I mean, for a pensioner, you're now looking at, well, what's that, $2,400, $2,500 a year for health insurance. It's pretty crazy. So then you start looking at policies, right? And then you start going back into the background of that and you start thinking, well, obviously you don't need reproductive health and you don't need pregnancy, but then you start thinking about all the things that, well, as an ailing elderly person, psychology services in hospital, well, may you end up needing that? Should that be covered? So the point that I'm trying to get to is it is a very complex system to even just start looking at things like excesses and other, add-on costs around all of those things. It's really not surprising that students, particularly those that come from overseas, who have their own healthcare systems, walk into Australia and think, where do I even begin? It's crazy. Yeah.
So what you're seeing there, even for yourself and for an international student, which would be much more hard, and think about it, they're away from home, they're away from their healthcare system, their family, friends who can support them and probably guide them, or a GP that they've been seeing for decades of their lives, is what you're seeing is a confidence gap as much as a knowledge gap. So there's both, right? And what we're seeing with students is English is their second language. They're away from home. It's already complex. You've got some countries, so I'll give you an example of a source country, China, where you show up to their hospitals, you're triaged in seconds. The out-of-pockets are up front. Everything is triaged in a very quick manner. They know where they're going. They know how it happens. Then you have other countries. For example, it could be like India or another sub-Asian continent, where rocking up to emergency is the right thing to do. In Australia, you don't do that. We now have urgent care. We've got the GP. So again, there is gap around the language, the education, and our Allianz partners, we spend a lot of time educating our customers on the healthcare system. What does it mean to have that policy? Where do you go when you need it? And that's why we've invested in Sonder as a value proposition item to support students, number one, in language 24/7 and steer them in the right way, not only around the safety aspect of Sonder. So initially Sonder was a safety app for students, and then they moved into the healthcare and wellbeing space, which our students are using, right? So they're calling up, messaging, hey, I've got this rash. Somebody may speak to them and say, look, just head over to the GP tomorrow, or they triage them in the right pathway. Or if it's something serious, go to emergency. So again, they're led in the right path in a modality that suits them. It's 24/7. Again, it's that preventative way of healthcare delivery as well. I guess from what needs to change, I think the sector is doing a lot of work. and the universities and some of our competitors, yes, we're educating students on that, but I think it's more clear education pre-arrival needs to happen on that topic, because again, they don't know what they're walking into until they need the GP and doctor. And when you're 20, 21, 19, you don't go to the GP. You don't need to, unless something really happens to you.
I couldn't agree more. So previously, a couple of my previous roles have been Director International. So I've looked after the student support services. Obviously, having worked at Allianz as well, one of the key services that I think is so important, and it came up, the Koala ran a number of, roundtables last year, and we looked at healthcare. One of the things was on-campus support. So actually having somebody in the student centre. So I know that Allianz, obviously has on-campus support for those, I guess, for the want of a better word, clients or institutions that you work with that you're a preferred supplier for. I think that is so important to make sure that there's that interface for students on campus in a familiar environment to get advice. I hate to say from the horse's mouth, but from directly, some really direct around all of those things that you just spoke about. Where is the first port of call for things? Where is a doctor's service? And 9 times out of 10 there'll be a doctor's service on campus that you can go to initially. But how do you actually navigate that? And from my understanding, and I'm going to oversimplify this massively, but one of the things, literally, like when you travel overseas to a new country for the first time, catching a bus can be difficult. Do they accept cash? Is it credit card? Do you need a local travel card? What are the things around that? Just getting on the bus. How do you know when to get off? All of those, they're just really simple things, but they're really, really hard to navigate. So then up that ante into healthcare when you're vulnerable. You might be sick, you might not be feeling well, with all of the other things that you mentioned, Sam, and it's just so important. It's really, really, really critical.
Again, look, the universities, we do this quite well on campus, but we work hand in hand with our universities and our partners and our agents as well, to make sure that we're educating our students and supporting them. And like I said, when the university is closed, they have Sonda. Like I said, 24 hours can access it at any point in time as well.
Absolutely. Back when I was at Allianz, one thing that we were starting to get into more was around mental health. And I personally think mental health is really, really important. And I'm really happy that this report covered off mental health. One of the things that fascinated me, though, was some people thought that mental health was doing okay and others reported that it was declining. What do you make of that?
His outcomes are shaped by a number of variables, and we keep talking about all these variables, right? Financial security, social connection, language, navigation, new places. So, for example, 34% of our students report struggling, but 39% report they're improving, okay? And two things can exist at once. So those core drivers, I just mentioned those variables, they're probably driven by things like cultural beliefs around stigma, around mental health. So for example, in some cultures, and I can speak openly, I'm Lebanese, and mental health is not a thing we talk about, or my mum would never speak about that to me, right? Or going to the psychologist may be seen as shameful, or talking about sexual health is shameful as well. So some students may come to this country with those barriers and those stigmas attached to them, and then it may take them some time to understand and adjust. And again, maybe of those who reported that there is an improvement, they are now understanding our system, our way of living, what it's like to be living in an Australian country where it's multicultural and open, right? But again, differences in seeking help as well may differ between groups. Again, and the pressures. So you might have that alleviated by, I can access, I can speak to someone, no one's going to judge me here. And then some people coming out here having that pressure to earn money. Okay, maybe somebody has funded them to come to Australia. And I've heard, and even through my own community here in Sydney, for example, my neighbour mentioned to me once that his brother funded his tuition, right? So paid for university. And the expectation is when he's older, in his mid-30s, and his brother's kids need to go to university, that he will reciprocate that. So think about the pressure that my brother's paying for me. And then in the future, when I am hopefully successful and in this country and working, that I have to pay this back somehow. So think that's a lot of pressure for a 21-year-old or a 19-year-old person fending for themselves out here for the first time. So like I said, they're struggling and some reporting improvements because there's different variables being alleviated or weighted down on them as well.
A couple of things. Firstly, I made the same deal with my mum, to be honest. She paid for my uni on the proviso that I would pay for my kids. And I think that's a beautiful thing because it shares the love forward, right? So it's an amazing thing. But it does add a bit of pressure to you in many ways. And then also just picking up on that thread around the sexual health. that was one of the things that jumped out to me. There's some fantastic statistics in there, just data that I never thought that I would actually see around attitudes to sexual health and understanding, which I thought were fascinating. But maybe just sort of picking up on the cost issue again, my knee has been a bit buggered lately. I'm a runner. I haven't been able to run for a month. And I know I should probably go and get an MRI, but I've been putting that off because, it's a lot of money. It's $500. But so one of the things that really jumped out at me from this report was around the fact that a lot of students are skipping meals due to cost pressures. That's really worrying, I think, for anyone to read. So from your perspective, what responsibility do you think sits with providers, insurers and government to respond to that kind of insight?
Yeah, look, and I just want to mention not only students, like 62% of them are not maintaining a balanced diet, right?
Yeah, I saw that too. That was amazing. Yeah.
It's a lot of...
I'll put my hand up. I went to Hawkesbury Ag and it was 2-minute noodles all the time. All the time.
So again, and they are skipping meals. We're also seeing this, and we partnered with Food Bank and the Food Bank social impact report that they produce every year. Not only is it the students are skipping meals, we're seeing domestic, everyday Australians skipping meals as well, or cutting back because of the cost of living. So it is a real pressure in Australia. And I guess from a responsibility across the sector, as an insurer, we're trying to help in those moments that matter through Food Bank. Again, we've seen over 12,000 students, 109 kilos worth of food. And I'm telling you, when I'm at those activations, and I've been at probably 90% of them, you hear the stories from the students, it will break your heart. And not only that, there was an example of a student where she said, okay, thank you for this bag. But not only am I going to have this bag of food, I'm going to share this with my neighbours. And I'm like, why are you sharing it with your neighbours? Well, she goes, they're elderly people. They can't leave the house and no one's really helping them. It took everything to contain myself that day. But I said to her, how about come back around the line and grab another bag? Because not only are they helping themselves, they're actually helping the community too and people around them. So again, the pressure's there. What we do see in the market from a responsibility perspective, we see our institutions already putting those pantries up every day for the students, have those activations on campus. We've got one university also thinking about implementing Food Bank on top of what we've done in one of their campuses as well, because they can see the value. So universities are really driving that responsibility through financial aid, those food pantries, there's activations on campus. But I think as an industry, we need to work together more on that topic, but also it is a Australian-wide issue. So I think what's important for us Allianz partners is still committing to the cause at all times and continue to support those students in the moments that matter. And again, if you're not eating well, it means you are not focused with your studies, your nutrition is no good, and there is a downstream impact to your health. So again, we must remain committed to that. And I have to say the institutions really, really do a lot on campus to support all the students out there, both domestic and international.
I want to jump, sorry, Dirk, I know you probably want to go on, and I want to jump in on that. I want to come to social license. Allianz, you guys are supporting our industry. You're supporting not only the students here from overseas, you're supporting our communities, domestic students, people outside, and peripheral to our institutions. Universities are doing the same. They're looking after our students. And we have this freaking narrative, I get really upset about this. We have this narrative in our country around social license and that universities have lost their social license. This is the perfect example of universities not only delivering on their social license, but going beyond. But these stories just don't hit the mainstream media because they're not sexy. It doesn't make a headline. So I just want to call that out and just say, hats off to Allianz for doing what you do, and to those universities that also, work in that space, acknowledge these real challenges that our communities are going through, and put their money where their mouth is and launch initiatives to actually support students and communities.
And SOSH continues to improve that dialogue between our partners and even non-partners, universities that we're not partnered with. Again, they are picking up this report and going, okay, well, we can improve here and here and here. And that's important. That's the aim of SOSH, right? It is to help universities, improve and enhance what they're currently doing, which is good at the moment. But we can always improve. Everyone can always improve. Even what we're doing, we try to take it to the next level every year on year, even with SOSH, with Food Bank as well. So my main message is the responsibility is around maintaining to the commitment and taking it to the next level into the future.
Yeah. Awesome. Interestingly, sorry, Sam, just one more thing. I didn't hear anything about the government doing anything in that space, right? It's easy to lump the blame on institutions and everybody around the periphery. And sorry, that's not quite fair because government does have a lot of support, particularly for domestic students, not so much for international students, but they do fund the odd program. But yeah, I don't think we get enough credit in our industries.
No, we don't. But like I said, we're doing a lot. It's just about sticking to it, moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. Moving along a little bit, one thing that buoyed me was the fact that 60% of students say they feel excited about the future. That's quite an optimistic outlook. Are we at risk of taking that for granted, do you think? Or
Well, there's some positive signals on that. So one, we'll give you the high level overview. Coming to Australia, it's a beautiful country. Like I said, the institutions are world-class, best-in-class places to learn. It's a great place to come, right? While there are some pressures coming out to the country, there are some positive signals in the report, and you can see them. Like around 59% of them want to stay here and continue their studies, or probably convert into OVHC, try and remain in the country and contribute to the economy, right? A lot of them are making friends. They're feeling supported by the institutions. It was over 65% saying the institutions are supporting them. So these are really big green flags.
Yeah,
so there are no red flags. Besides the cost of living pressures and everything else surrounding it, the green flags that I just spoke about are really important for keeping them here. So while they are positive, it makes it easier for them to stay amongst all the pressure they are currently experiencing at the moment. So I think we are not taking it for granted. We just have to continue to keep working on those green flags. Again, making sure they want to stay here post-grad, they keep studying. Their institutions are looking after them. Insurance is easy for them to understand. All those green flags, if they are maintained, we'll continue to have a lot of students coming here, being happy, studying and achieving their goals while they're here.
Yeah, 100%. Rob and I often talk about, or we've talked in previous episodes around just how diverse our country is and how wonderful it is. And, I think two episodes ago, we we're talking about the Blue Mountains and, just being able to see kids get out and do things. And a lot of, how do I phrase this? There's the formal part of it, like you deliver education, you have formal programs, but so much of the learning takes place outside of the classroom. And like you say, friends, networks, going to see things that they'd never see back in their home country. And if they're from particular cities, say in Asia, which might be subject to potentially more pollution, having the clean air and the blue skies that we offer in Australia. All of those kind of things just meld together to create that really good experience that students just love about Australia.
Not only that, think about, the multicultural Australia, the shops, the grocers. Sometimes you don't feel like you're away from home. I think in the last 10 years, I've started to see a lot more culturally focused grocers. And I had seen a very large Korean grocer pop up nearby me, and I was like, this is wonderful. Like any product that you want, and if you were away from home, you can definitely grab it off the shelf and you can feel like you're at home in Australia. So again, there's a lot to offer here, from food to being excited to wanting to stay here, on top of the cost of living pressures. Once you balance it out, that 60% is a great start, right? So year on year hasn't changed too much, which is something we'll continue to monitor over a period of time as well.
You could leave the sector with one key takeaway, Sam. What would it be out of this report? Once again, my first time reading it, I just thought it was a fantastic report, really worth picking up and reading. But what for you is the one key thing that sectors should be thinking about?
So in this sector, it's quite nuanced. And I guess the greatest impact comes when we work together and not acting alone, understanding what's been successful and applying that to have sort of, the best in class scenario, or responding collectively as a group towards our students. I think that's the best thing we can do, is learning, responding and continuing what we're doing. But like I said, making sure we level up every year on year for our students if they come to our country.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Dirk? Final thoughts from you, mate, before we wrap up?
Mate, I reckon that's a really good point to wrap up on. I think
so.
It's quite a high note working together. It's really good. No, I think we're good.
Awesome. Sam, thank you so much for joining us on Global Horizons. Once again, where can people get this report if they, the SOSH, I quite like that.
SOSH.
Where can they find? Probably just find it on Google. Google's SOSH.
Absolutely. If you type in SOSH, Allianz Partners, it will pop up. It's on our website as well. If you follow us on LinkedIn, it's on LinkedIn as well. But if anyone's interested, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to send you the report personally. And we are definitely happy to present or talk you through any of the statistics. My team is quite passionate, and we have some subject matter experts definitely to support you if you have anything that you're really interested to dive into, because we have all the background stats. So please reach out to us. We would appreciate it as well.
Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast, Sam. And once again, if you're a listener, but you're not yet subscribed to The Koala, and that must be exactly 0 people who are listening, you must do it. thekoalanews.com is your place to get all of your news about Australian international education. Thank you, Mr. Mulder, for everything you do, keeping us up to date day in, day out. And make sure you follow along on LinkedIn. Hey, mate, did you get to your 10,000? That's what I want to know. Are you at 10,000 yet?
Not quite. I think I'm 3 short of 9.5 at the moment. So
I'm on Australia.
It'll be a few weeks. But
Come on, we
there.
need to get Dirk to his 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. That's going to be a massive milestone when we get here. I'll certainly be popping something when you get to your 10K. So thanks a lot, mate, as always, and great having you on the pod to talk about everything Australian international ed.
Mate, thank you. And thanks to Samantha for coming along. And what a great report. And congratulations to Allianz
Thank
Partner.
you very much.
See you next time.
And hopefully we'll talk soon. So thank you very much. Have a good day, guys. Bye.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Global Horizons podcast, consider subscribing to our newsletter. Search for Global Horizons podcast and then just pop in your email address, and that way you will never miss out on all of the critical international education news that you need to stay up to date with. This episode has been produced on Garrigal Land in Sydney. Our video and audio editor is Len Zamora, and I'm your host, Rob Malicki. Have an awesome day. See you in the next episode.